Over the last 3 or 4 decades, we have witnessed a truly unique phenomenon unfolding in the People's Republic of China. Regardless of your opinion about the country, this is not the time for criticism or defense. The important thing here is to observe an economic development that reached levels that, at the time, no one considered possible. Few understood what the Chinese were doing, and that was just the beginning. Perhaps you didn't pay much attention. After all, it was just another among many poor countries trying to stabilize their economy. If we take economic growth and the ability to lift people out of poverty as a reference, the numbers are impressive. We're talking about over 1 billion people, roughly 4 to 5 times the population of the United States. And the most impressive part, they not only achieved this goal but now compete equally with the United States in the most advanced levels of technology. How could this have been imagined? Today, where we once saw dependence on companies like Intel, they now have their own equivalents and in some cases, are at the forefront. A striking example of this is the electric vehicle sector. About 10 or 15 years ago, major global automakers began investing in programs to develop electric cars, seeking alternatives to fossil fuels. Many initiatives emerged during this period, but the results achieved by China stood out. Their electric cars are not only better but also cheaper than those produced anywhere else in the world. They won the competition. And now, what should be done in light of this? In situations like this, the United States' reaction has been to resort to trade tariffs. When foreign companies stand out, the response is to make it harder for their products to enter the market. Currently, the Biden administration imposes a 100% tariff on Chinese electric cars. This means that if a vehicle costs $30,000, the American consumer has to pay an additional $30,000 in tariffs, raising the final price to $60,000. The result of this is that there are virtually no Chinese electric cars on American roads. However, in Europe, 1 in 3 electric cars is made in China. The largest, most successful and fastest growing producer is a company that many Americans have never even heard of, BYD. The US reaction was simple: exclude them from the market. This stance, however, is counterproductive and, from an economic perspective, difficult to justify. While the rest of the world advances in the transition to electric vehicles, American competitors face a significant obstacle. While foreign companies can acquire the best cars for $30,000, Americans have to spend $40,000 or $50,000 on lower quality vehicles. This puts US companies at a clear disadvantage in the global market. When I studied economics, I remember learning that behaviors like this range from counterproductive to irrational, or a mix of both. During my PhD in economics at Yale, I had a particularly memorable colleague, Janet Yellen. Today, she is the US Secretary of the Treasury. Knowing Janet, I know she understands that this approach is flawed, but since it is part of the official government stance, she has no choice but to defend it. What we are actually seeing is that the United States is losing the competition to China, and actions like these reflect the desperation of those who don't know how to respond. Instead of surpassing the Chinese with a competitive plan, the response has been to raise barriers. In Washington, they believe they are isolating China, but in practice they are isolating themselves. For the rest of the world, this stance reinforces the image of a declining empire, which brings a certain satisfaction to many countries. As a nation, it is crucial that we wake up to this reality. 40 years ago, much of the developing world, including Asia, Africa, and Latin America, faced similar challenges. Many countries aspired to achieve something like what China has accomplished, but only the Chinese truly succeeded. The secret lies in understanding how they did it. Yes, China leveraged technologies and advancements already developed in the West, but not in a mysterious or incomprehensible way. 25 years ago, the Chinese made a strategic decision. They made a proposal to developed countries, especially the United States, Western Europe, and Japan. The proposal was clear: we know you are capitalists and your main goal is profit. We offer 2 things: a skilled, disciplined, and extremely affordable workforce, as well as the fastest growing consumer market in the world. Business schools teach that entrepreneurs should seek opportunities where labor is cheap and markets are expanding. This is exactly what attracted companies to China. The result? Extraordinary profits, which forced even the most reluctant companies to realize that if they didn't establish themselves in China, they would be overtaken by competitors with cheaper products and exclusive access to the Chinese market. A clear example is General Motors, which today sells more cars in China than in the United States. This was the differentiator that turned China into a success story. Other countries tried, but no one replicated this model with the same effectiveness. Furthermore, the Chinese model is being internationalized through the BRICS bloc, which should worry the United States much more than it currently seems to. The 20th century left us with 2 main and opposing economic systems. On one side, the Anglo-American model, based primarily on private initiative and profit-driven capitalism. On the other, the Soviet system, which proposed an alternative focused on state-owned and state-managed enterprises, particularly in the industrial sector. These systems were, in many ways, polar opposites. Over time, a group of people emerged who were not completely satisfied with either of the two main economic models of the 20th century and sought something intermediate, a kind of hybrid that combined the best of both, discarding the less effective parts. It can be argued, and with solid reasoning, that this is exactly what the Chinese Communist Party did. We often forget, but we shouldn't, that in the 1960s the Soviet Union and China even faced each other militarily. Their differences were so deep that they led to armed conflicts and mutual wounds. Therefore, it is not surprising that the Chinese made a strategic decision to open the doors to foreign companies. Bring your technology, they said, because you are more advanced than we are in many aspects. If we examine Chinese publications from that time, we will find many reflections on this. Much of what these texts proposed was inspired by the United States, learning from them and trying to do it the same way but a little better. However, most of China's progress, about 90%, was based on absorbing American knowledge. They paid for this in a conventional way without shortcuts. The narrative that the Chinese stole technology is simplistic and misguided. No American company was forced to establish itself in China. Those that chose to do so accepted the terms of a clear agreement. They would share technology, demonstrate how to use it, and train professionals. In exchange, the Chinese would offer labor and access to the market. It was a transparent deal. American companies profited while the Chinese acquired technical knowledge. Portraying this agreement as theft is fallacious. It's like saying I give you $100 in exchange for your shirt, we make the deal, and then I complain that you stole the shirt from me. There was no theft, there was a deal. You may regret the trade later, but that's another issue. The Chinese, however, resent this narrative because it rekindles memories of the century of humiliation. For them, what they hear is, the implicit message behind this narrative is something like, you are naive, backward, too Chinese to achieve this on your own. You must have stolen it. I can understand where this comes from. For a long time, the United States was the center of innovation and major technological advancements. Silicon Valley, for example, deserves part of its fame. I acknowledge that. However, the results achieved based on these foundations are also remarkable. If we are honest, we know that much of what Silicon Valley has done was also inspired or adapted from ideas developed in other parts of the world. This always happens when one society rises on the remnants of another. What we call chauvinism often comes into play. The winner rewrites history, minimizing or even ignoring the contributions of others. It's not hard to imagine how, from there, these contributions end up being completely forgotten. For me, a clear example of this is baseball. When I was young, I loved American baseball and saw it as a predominantly white sport. I remember questioning why there were no black players in the sport. The explanation I was given was that they lacked the ability or simply didn't know how to play. Fortunately, I lived long enough to witness the importance of Jackie Robinson, the first black player to break that barrier. Today, we recognize that black players not only have extreme talent for sports, but they were also instrumental to the professional leagues in an overwhelming way. Their absence in baseball had nothing to do with a lack of athletic ability, but rather with other reasons. I believe the same principle applies here. If your economy is based on a specific decision-making model, your society rises or falls based on that same structure. In the case of past Chinese empires, their economic collapses occurred because they were grounded in a feudal structure, with lords and serfs, something similar to what happened in Europe during the millennium between the fall of Rome and the Renaissance. Regardless of how you prefer to date this period, the European feudal system, which allowed for great accomplishments, also carried the seeds of its own downfall. Why do I mention this? Because the same reasoning applies to China's history. China seeks to harness all the benefits of private capitalism, such as industrial modernization, which are undeniably significant. However, because of its ideology, they also understand that the same factors driving them forward can become the source of their downfall. That's why they need to stay alert, recognize the signs, and act before problems arise. How did this moment arrive for the United States and China? In the United States, we innovate to the extent that something becomes profitable for someone to invest in. When a person sees an opportunity to get rich with an innovative idea, we celebrate it. But what about the Chinese? What did they do? They said, yes, but if this is the only focus, if the only innovation plan is based on what is profitable for the private sector, we will miss opportunities, fail to invest in promising areas, and this will harm us. In China, half of the economy operates with the goal of private profit. The tech sector, for example, is allowed to thrive, and millionaires are created in the process. After the United States, China is the country with the most private millionaires and billionaires. However, the other half of the economy doesn't follow this logic. They make economic development decisions, including technological innovations, based on social objectives set by the Communist Party and the government. For example, if they want to surpass the United States in specific areas and there are no private companies willing to lead those efforts, they simply take responsibility. The government does the work, and perhaps later private companies will take an interest. If that happens, they move on to other priorities. In the United States, the economic system is structured in such a way that opportunities that are not immediately profitable for the private sector end up being overlooked. This doesn't mean these opportunities don't exist, but that they remain distant dreams rarely being realized. On the other hand, in China the question is profit essential? Yes, but it's not the only decisive factor. For them, profit is just one of several objectives within a much broader strategy. This is what they mean when they mention socialism. It's an approach that goes beyond the exclusive pursuit of private gains, something that predominates in the United States. While in the United States innovation is mainly driven by what generates profit for individuals or corporations, in China, economic decisions are guided by social goals and the common good, without relying solely on immediate profitability. This model allows China to invest in areas that the private market might ignore or underestimate because they don't offer quick returns, but which are crucial for the country's long-term progress. If China continues to combine innovation aimed at private profit with a government-driven strategic plan focused on essential areas like technology and science, without relying exclusively on the market, it could surpass the United States on several fronts. By investing in sectors of high social and strategic value, even if initially not profitable, and making long-term economic decisions to promote comprehensive growth, China has the potential to lead in both private wealth and technological and scientific advancements on a global scale. Now, we want to hear from you. Will China surpass the United States in power? Or do you believe the US still has what it takes to maintain its position? Share your opinion in the comments. We're eager to hear what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you won't miss the next videos. See you next time.